Well, when I was at school, history was my favourite subject, and I went on and I studied that as an undergraduate at the University of Liverpool. And I think my interest in law really stemmed from my perception that very similar analytical skills were required. So I hoped that I might have an aptitude for it, and I tend to quite like things that I think I'm reasonably good at. So that was what started it. But I really didn't expect before I began studying it to be quite so taken by law as I was. I took the 1-year conversion course at City University, and I found it absolutely fascinating. And I was really quite tempted to spend more time studying law as a postgraduate. But I had a chat with my father about it. He very gently suggested it was about time I got a job. So I did, and I never regretted it. I practiced as a barrister for 23 years, and most of my work was in the areas of public law, human rights, and information law. In my early years at the bar, I did a lot of cases concerning education, local government, prisons, and things like that. And then I had a 2.5-year break from the bar when my sons were born. And then when I returned to practice, my diet of cases changed quite dramatically. I was fortunate to be involved in many of the cases concerning the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as the Guantanamo Bay and Belhaj cases. So as a senior, junior, and in silk, I had particular specialisms in national security, public international law, and human rights work. But before I became a full-time judge, I was also I was appointed as a Section 9(4) Deputy High Court Judge. That was early in 2016. And so I combined my last 4 years in practice at the bar with sitting on a part-time basis in the Queen's Bench Division and the Administrative Court. For each hearing, obviously preparation is required, so I spend time beforehand reading into the case. Then in some cases I'll give an oral judgment immediately at the end of the hearing, but there are many others where I don't do that, and so then I'll spend time after the hearing writing my judgment. And a lot of the time I'm sitting on my own, but there are other cases where I'll be sitting with other judges. So for example, this week I was sitting in the Special Immigration Appeals Commission. And so some of my time is spent outside the hearing discussing the issues with the other members of the court or tribunal. And then there are other matters that are dealt with without a hearing. So some of my time spent dealing with applications on paper, making orders, giving reasons in writing, that kind of thing. And I've also recently taken on a role as an administrative court liaison judge. So when I'm not sitting, I have some administrative and leadership responsibilities. And I've been visiting Cardiff and Birmingham recently to meet and talk to staff and judges in those regions. And then, well, apart from that, I think it's things like continuing education. So the remit of a Queen's Bench Division judge is very broad. So there are always plenty of new areas for me to be learning about. It's an incredibly rewarding job. As a judge in the Queen's Bench Division, the opportunity to engage in just an extraordinary range of stimulating work is wonderful. I think the system of appointing practicing lawyers to spend a few weeks a year sitting as a fee-paid judge provides those who are interested in the bench with a really invaluable chance to do the job before committing to switching to full-time. So it's definitely worth applying for posts such as recorder, deputy high court judge, and so on. I mean, those are very competitive selection processes. So even if you get a knockback, I would say it's well worth trying again if it's something that you really want to do. I found that once I began sitting as a deputy, even when I was then appearing as a barrister, I took more notice of what the judges I appeared before did. It's not that I was ignoring the judges beforehand, but I was just more attuned to notice how, for example, they controlled the court and interacted with staff and court users and so on. And so that was very helpful. And I mean, more broadly, I think I just found talking to judges about their job helpful. And that was something, I mean, over the years, I found that there were plenty of opportunities to do that, for example, by attending specialist bar conferences and lectures and so on. There would always be, you know, opportunities to speak to people. The cost of becoming a barrister was not as high when I began as it is now, and I was also fortunate to get a scholarship from Middle Temple, which was a great help when I was at bar school. And then I was offered a pupillage with a generous award. So I think I was lucky not to have to face the levels of debt that many young lawyers do. Before I started my career, I certainly had a perception of barristers as all fitting a particular mould, one that I knew I did not fit. And it took a little while for me to appreciate that there is no mould. I didn't have to fit any existing mould or break one. In reality, individual practices are incredibly diverse and suit people with so many different qualities and attributes. I mean, on a more practical level, I suppose combining a busy practice with being a new parent is not easy. Luckily, I was in a chambers where I had the option of taking up to 10 years off, and I had the role model of Mrs. Justice Elizabeth Lang, as she now is, who had returned to practice very successfully after a very long period of maternity leave. So that really helped me. I was able to take several years out of practice when my sons were born and then return to practice part-time for a couple of years, confident that it could be done. I had seen that it could be done successfully, and so that certainly helped break that particular barrier.